All right, let's get into nutrition. Okay, I put up here, there are multiple strategies when it comes to nutrition, and we're going to touch on a good amount of them. But I want to make sure we keep this super uber simple, because in nutrition, there's so many things that you hear that one time they told me eat eggs, one time they told me not to eat eggs, butter was good, butter is bad. And this is where we're going to walk through some of that. And then again, ask any questions. Let me make sure I've hit on the things so far. Okay, good. Food is fuel and building blocks. To keep this, again, extremely simple is if you look at a piece of food on your plate, the purpose of it at the end of the day is to do one of two things in general, which is, okay, so food, it goes through chemistry, which again, we don't need to know, and then it turns into usually one of two things, and then there's also a kickoff here. The kickoff is waste, what the body doesn't need. But when I eat something, it's gonna do what? Turn into this, energy, something to be burnt, right, so that I have energy, or building blocks. Isn't that, so again, if you just, food is simple. If whatever I'm eating is turning into something in my body, or it's this, right? Okay? And then the elimination of this is another big deal. This is where detox comes into play, because sometimes we're eating stuff, there's very little of this in it, and there's very little of this that the body wants to use, and there's a heck of a lot of this in the form of toxins or plastics and dyes and chemicals, and the body says, all right, we want to get that out, but sometimes our pathways are crap, and our body stores the waste. And we get bigger. We're going to hit on what's considered weight loss resistance when we get to detox. So I'm going to press in on that a little bit more. But one strategy just to touch on, I'm a big 80-20 principle person, meaning that generally if you look at your plate, 80% of that should be stuff that is great for the body, and 20% you can cheat on. Now that's if you're already in a pretty healthy state, meaning you're not on a bunch of medications, you feel pretty good, you're active, you're doing stuff pretty good. You don't have to be perfect. But if you're trying to reverse something, if you're trying to get off of a medication, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to detox, 80-20 doesn't work. But think of that as the goal. I want to get to a point where 80% healthy, 20% whatever. Ideally, the higher, the healthier, the better. Seasonal eating. Now, I don't mean seasonal, I guess I should say this. I do mean it in the form of what's in season, but even differently, okay? I study a little bit of nature and its patterns, because I think that's where the wisdom is, okay? Every year, we go through 4 seasons. What do the animals do when those seasons occur? They slightly adapt their diet every 3 to 4 months, because nature forced them to. Does that make sense? As humans, we think we should eat one way for the rest of our lives, and we're trying to find that perfect way. But in all reality, we should cycle every 3 to 4 months something new, something different, something into our body. And ideally, what's growing during that time. So that's why seasonal eating, what's in season, eat that. And then the more local, the better, because what grows locally here in Colombia is what our body breathes in. It's what we need to. We need to use the plant's chemistry that figured out how do I tolerate the pollen, to when we eat the plant locally, our body starts to figure out how to tolerate the pollen or whatever it may be, the sunshine. So that's where local eating comes into play. For the seasonal eating. So again, twofold to that. Think of adapting or doing something for 90 to 120 days and then making some changes. You can go longer, but the healing cycles occur in 90 and 120 day cycles, which is also interesting. 90% of your body is new 90 to 120 days every cycle. Why a lot of times, even for our chiropractic stuff, why we recommend somewhere in like the 3 to 4 months healing cycle, take an x-ray, look at stuff, because your body's went through a full cycle of healing. How many of us do a diet for 90 to 120 days? Close to 0%. We do it for a week, we do it for 3 days, we do it for 2 weeks maybe, and then we go, yeah, it's either working or not. You don't know if it's working until 90 to 120 days later. You don't know if a supplement's working for that long. You might feel some immediate stuff, like, oh, I'm starting to feel slimmer, I'm starting to have more energy, these sort of things. But in all reality, until your body goes through one of those cycles, you don't know. So literally every organ system replaces itself on, the things that are longer, things like bone, neurology, that's the 10% that's not brand new. That's why it's harder if that stuff gets damaged or replaced. But things like skin, stomach lining, heart cells, they're literally dying and replacing. So following a program for that amount of time makes sense, and that fits right into the seasonal eating sort of thing on what our body should adapt. Intermittent fasting, I'm gonna come back to, or remind me to. It's one of those things that fasting and forcing the body into a metabolic position is how you can kind of overcome plateaus. So sometimes people are like, I'm just stuck, I can't lose weight. I can promise you, I can force you to lose weight. Your body's not gonna like it because it's gonna get shocked. But if you stopped eating for a couple days, you think your body's gonna adapt and start losing some weight? Absolutely. You stop eating for an extended period of time, it's gonna burn off what it has. It forces metabolic reaction, right? Intermittent fasting is just customizing your time frames of when you eat on a day-to-day basis. But then there's block fasting, which is days in a row of fasting and different styles of that. I've done a 5-day water-only fast. I've done a 14-day juice-only fast. I've done a lot of different testing and experiments on the body to kind of see how it responds and reacts, and it's remarkable. On the 14-day juice fast, not trying to lose weight, I lost 25 pounds, maybe 27 actually. I mean, I was looking like a bird. It was bad. But I felt great. I mean, again, the body, it forced it to respond and then reintroduce food. Nutrient density, this is where the what can I eat, that's the stuff that you guys were here earlier circling. I made it simple. Because we talk a lot about what you can't eat, right? Why it's bad and avoid this. So what you guys circled on that third page is what I want you to start customizing your meal plan around. In other words, I just forced you to say you actually do like healthy food, and you already circled it. Because people are like, I don't like healthy food, I don't like how it tastes. Well, now, whatever you just circled, we want to start creating meals around that. And it's broken down into okay, pick a protein, then pick a good fat source, and then one thing actually I will point out, which will pertain to, I'll touch on food combination later, get that. There's what's called the advanced plan and the core plan, which I'm going to touch on next. It's defined on page 1, the factors. Just to kind of keep it easy, the core plan is kind of your lifestyle plan. It's kind of a plan that you stay in, if you will. And it's really just eating real foods. It's eating things that God designed, minimally changed by man, no additives, no preservatives, no colorings, no dyes, just food. The advanced plan is taking that real food and narrowing it down to forcing the body to decrease inflammation, repair hormones, force weight loss, detox the body. So that's the advanced plan. And we'll talk about criteria on who should do it. But at the bottom of that first page, it talks about some of the rules of it. And you can see it's not simple in the sense that you're cutting out grains, sugars, fruits, anything that turns into sugar, gone for a time period there with advanced plan. Food combination real quick is, I'll touch on that. It's somewhat of an advanced strategy, so sometimes I get worried that I give you guys too much to think about. But it's more saying when you eat, and we talked about energy and building blocks, what's the things that you can combine together to eat that makes it simple on your digestive system? So I guess I'll touch on it right now. If you eat a piece of steak, and you eat a banana at the same time, right? So I'm eating steak and now I put a piece of fruit in my body. Do you guys agree, without knowing anything about nutrition or science or the gut, that they're gonna be broken down a little bit differently inside of you? Of course. So when there are different pathways and different enzymes and different nutrients that break that stuff down, what do you think happens to the one that's not getting broken down when I eat it? One's gonna sit in there. And it's gonna sit and ferment, kind of bloat the body, steal energy because it's just hanging out. Versus if I eat something that actually synergistically digests well together, it goes right through the system, right? So mono dieting is one strategy where it's like, in the morning, if you're gonna eat breakfast, eat just fruit. And to even go more extreme, eat just bananas. Not bananas, oranges, peaches, cherries, all the stuff in that category. But if you categorize it and say breakfast is just fruit, or breakfast is just meat, or breakfast is just nuts, there are four categories, technically 5, I guess. I'll hit this. Fruits are simple sugars, so anything simple sugar, fast, think of it as fast. Then there's the complex carbs, so starches, starchy stuff, potatoes, fries, pasta, grains. Then there's meats, and then there's nuts and seeds. They're in the same category. And then there's a neutral category called veggies, essentially. And there's more specifics to this, but you can eat any of these with veggies. You just can't eat them with each other. Now, it's not that you can't. I shouldn't say that, right? This is what I mean by I don't want you to overthink this and then you guys leave here and go, well, Dr. Tom said I can't eat blueberries and... Because this is what happens. We get hung up on it. I always think just eat real food, and that's where we'll hit the simple. But if you're like, man, my energy is just so bad, and that's a focus for you right now, because there may be somebody here, it's like, I'm in the advanced stuff. Then start looking at what you're combining together to eat. So you would eat, meat with broccoli, not meat with potatoes. See the difference in those two? You feel significantly different. That's why Thanksgiving's we all go into comas, because we literally just eat all this as much as we possibly can. Food combination. All right, try to clean up some of the, guys, if you're looking for a diet, you'll find it, is kind of the thing. So that's why I want the rules to be simple and principles, not here's the new fad diet. There's the soft taco hard body diet. There's the wine diet. There's the beer diet. I mean, literally the stuff that comes out, go to a store and you will see everything. So I'm not a big fan of reading lots of these books and trying to, because you just find like, oh, I can do this one. And there's no merit to this. There's no rules or principles. There might be 1 or 2 things per book that's like, all right, that makes sense with God's principles. So here's how I look at it. Super simple. What's the point of food? Raw materials for your body and energy, okay? Here's what's even cooler is when you look at food that God designed, it looks like the body part it helps with. Yeah, has anybody heard of God's Pharmacy? You've never heard, anybody heard of this? No. So here's what it is. I just think of God up there being like, I didn't make this tough. It literally looks like the part that's bothersome. Look at, zoom in on a few. You ever cut a carrot in half? And what are carrots helpful for? Does it not look extremely close to an eye? Oh, wow. Yeah, how about walnuts? What do they look like? How about the chambers of a tomato? How about there's a whole list. If you just Google God's Pharmacy, it goes through what the foods are, what they look like. Oh, celery's good for bones. Looks like long bones. I mean, in other words, it couldn't have gotten easier. And I share this because, guys, if you do have specific issues like heart issues or lung issues or eye issues, start eating foods that support that tissue. Like, again, just going back to like super simple stuff. And it is crazy when you think like the food could have been triangles, squares, and circles. And the fact that it's that closely designed to it, like some of this stuff where it's like, why does a fig look like that? Why does sweet potatoes look the way they look? And they're nearly identical to body parts. Like cauliflower looks like all the lung bronchi, and it's wild. Anyways, I always thought that was cool because here's what we do. If we were to look at our plates, 90% of it doesn't look like food, doesn't look like body parts. We've messed with it so much that man gets involved and screws all this stuff up. So I created on page 2 a process that I want you guys to kind of see where you're at. I call it the McDonald's to maximize living. We're all on this scale somewhere. Some of us are closer over here where we're doing pretty good, but there's next steps. Some of us are way over here where it's like, man, I just can't get out of the habit of fast food and eating crappy and it's like, the information, but it's hard to achieve. So I put together like my 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program, if you will, on like trying to figure out food. So you'll see my step 1 is still mindset. It's still figuring out like, why do you want to change? Because if you don't answer that question, if it's just like, yeah, I want to look better in a bikini, next year you'll push that off till next summer. There's no drive behind that. And then we'll talk through some of the things that are on there, but I'm not going to go through that in detail because I wrote that for you. But just know that we all, at every given moment, have next steps, me included. Okay, all the doctors here, all the staff here, we all have next steps. So here's our starting point. Choose God foods, as I mentioned. Don't overthink it. If I had an apple or strawberries and a Snickers bar, which one's healthier for you guys?
Snickers?
No. It's of course the strawberries and the apple. And guys, here's the thing, because like we tend to choose the Snickers, right? Why do we choose the Snickers when we know you don't have to be a nutritionist or a scientist or a doctor?
It tastes better. It's gooey.
Right. And so we know when it comes to like taking action on this stuff, the real issue isn't knowing what to eat. Like, because people are like, again, I've written out what to eat. You'll ask what to eat. I don't know the questions will be, I don't know what to eat, but you do know what to eat. You just choose the bad stuff, right? And when you start looking into what this stuff is, here's what I think the biggest issue is. We don't realize how bad and what that stuff on the left there does to our body. Like, it'd be one thing if we ate a Snickers and like a glob of fat pops up in our arm immediately, then we'd have a like, okay, maybe I should stop eating Snickers. We're not seeing the metabolic effects that are happening at the cellular level and why over time diabetes and cancer starts to show up. And I'm going to walk you through how I've simplistically mapped some of this stuff with this cell. And how inflammation and heart disease and cancer and all this stuff comes into play. And I'm going to use this nutrition stuff to show you. So our 2 straightforward nutrition plans, core plan and advanced plan, which I touched on. They're on the front of your sheets. For online, in the office, guys, you can pick up these sheets in the office. Just ask for our nutrition 5 essentials stuff. The core plan is just real God foods. It's super simple. You look at the food and you go, did God create this, or did man create this? Or did God create it and man's messed with it, right? Like genetically modified stuff. Do you guys think that's a really good idea? That man's getting involved with a God process and we're going to make it better? I've never seen that work out in anything, okay? Adding hormones to say chicken. You think that's going to be a great idea in the long run? Antibiotics in foods. So again, when you think of this stuff, just know that there are consequences to it. They may not be immediate, but they're down the road. So again, this is our long-term lifestyle plan. Then the advanced plan is weight loss, disease reversal. It's usually more short-term. So it's a short-term commitment. I still like it for a 90 to 120 day short-term commitment. But even within 30 days, guys, you will see a significant change if you go strict advanced plan. Part of how you choose this are what are your goals. The thing I like about these is eat as much as you want. We're not counting calories. We're not counting macros and this stuff. We're not getting too advanced. We're just looking at it and going, is it on this list of foods? Okay, great. I'm going to eat it. And when should I eat? When you're hungry. How's that for an idea, right? A lot of times, guys, you're eating because it's time to eat. Do you guys realize that? Breakfast, for example. Some of you in this room, you're not hungry when you wake up. Don't eat. Do you think a lion wakes up and says, you know what, should probably eat today because it's breakfast time? Or does a lion, it just hangs out and goes, it's time to eat, I'm gonna go kill something? That's how animals work, right? Animals, we are animals, don't just eat on a schedule to say it's time to, but we've screwed our schedules up, so intermittent fasting will come into play a little bit where we'll talk about that, but we just have to realize hunger is when we should eat. And I'll touch on this, thirst and hunger are very similar pathways neurologically. Meaning you might be thirsty and not hungry, but you're thinking you're hungry. So what you should do is guzzle down one of these, wait about 5 minutes, see if you were actually hungry. Is that fair? I'm sure I'll probably take a little sip. All right, and then we can get super advanced one-on-one. You know, I work with people a lot. blood testing, urine analysis, food sensitivity testing. There's some advanced stuff that's out there. Unfortunately, guys, your doctors don't talk about it, and insurances don't care about it. So guess who pays for it? You guys. The nice part about it, though, is you start learning what your body and chemistry needs and requires, so it's specific to you, it's not generic. Your insurance companies and doctors care about, let's wait until it's pathological, so your tests are now crappy, and let's try to save, give you a chemical to force it. What if we watched it functionally for a while to go, wait a minute, I'm deficient in vitamin B and D and C and magnesium, and you start realizing, like, well, the longer I'm deficient in that, something's going to happen, isn't it? So let's start supplementing with that or eating foods that have that, and all of a sudden I don't let it get pathological. That would be a good strategy here. Okay, so here's the 4 things I'm going to hit on nutrition as our simple stuff. Refined sugar, elimination, high fructose corn syrup, get rid of that stuff. So anything in that category that has high fructose corn syrup in it, just eliminate it. So we want to start looking at labels. We want to start understanding that. Changing your meats and dairy, I'm gonna go through each one of these in a little bit of detail. 3, understand the dirty dozen. This is where we're gonna kind of start factoring in toxicity and what man screwed up. So just understanding what we screwed up the most and avoid those. And this is where why should we eat organic? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then adding vitamins and minerals. Now, adding vitamins and minerals is probably the simplest thing you can do. Why? You just have to swallow a pill, right? Meaning, if I have somebody who just eats terribly, to get at least stuff in their body, they can, quote unquote, not change their diet, but at least get nutrients in. Is that fair? That's why I'm becoming more and more excited about supplements, in the sense that it is difficult for you guys, us, me included, to change our habits. But if you can do something super easy, like, all right, before I go to bed, just suck down a couple pills, at least I know your body's getting some building blocks for your cells. And then we go, let's not eat McDonald's, for 1 meal a day, and we keep working our way through the process. Okay, here's where I want to spend a good amount of time. And I'm sure you guys are all familiar with how bad sugar is or what you hear about it. But God designed our body. The tongue has this area of it that's sweet, right? That it wants sweets. And guess where that area is? Right, the front. So I look at that and think, all right, God wants us to have sweets. Just not your guys' definition of sweets, right? Not the extreme chemical version of sweet. So what we got to look at is changing our palate back to what sweet actually is, which would be things like fruits and natural occurring sweets, not stuff that elicits cocaine-like responses in our brain so that we get addicted to it. And so when I started looking into sugar, the average American ingests about 150 pounds a year of sugar. Around 5 pounds every 10 days that we're putting into our bodies. Now, does that mean you guys Americans are just like, oh, here's a bowl of sugar, the white stuff? No, where does sugar come from? Or what's it in? Literally, yeah, this is why we gotta look. You guys eat a piece of bread. Guess what that instantly turns into once it hits, not even down here, it instantly turns into sugar here. The enzymes break it down very quickly, turns into sugar, spikes your blood. What's the body got to do? Respond to it. The higher that is, the more of a problem we have. That's why things like that are pure sugar are very difficult on the bloodstream, because the body has to react to that, right? What are other things? In condiments, right? French fries and obviously the candies and things that are out there, it's everywhere. So I put on bullet point 1, we don't have a fat problem, we have a sugar problem, meaning that when we have an abundance of sugar, the body doesn't know what to do with it, so it stores it as what? Fat. Because it's a good source of energy when we need something quick. So when we expose a lot to our body and our blood sugar goes up, a little substance kind of floats around called insulin, and it does what? It pulls it from the blood and it puts it into a cell. So if I eat something and this is my artery and blood's flowing through this artery and I have a ton of sugar, right, that it instantly turns into, then my body, the pancreas starts to secrete insulin that comes up, and I think of it as like a car, and it just picks up the sugar. Okay, it drives around, it gets out of the cell, and it looks for a receptor on the cell. And it has to dock in this cell. Okay, if the insulin binds here, it opens up the gates to the cell, taking the sugar from the blood into your cell, where now your blood sugar goes down. Does that make sense? Because I want to go super simple on diabetes and cancer, on how this stuff starts to form. So if I have a ton of sugar here and I have enough insulin, it should bring it down. But if I keep doing this over and over and over again, what happens is it's not even so much, which we'll talk about what happens at the artery level. It's like, I think of these as garage doors. Every time I'm opening and closing this, and if I'm open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close, what happens to the garage doors is they start to break down. So now all of a sudden I eat sugar, I have enough insulin, right? But I have nowhere to park. So guess what it does? It hangs out in your artery, and therefore you go in to get your numbers checked, and your doctor says your blood sugar is elevated, but your insulin is perfectly normal. That's type 2 diabetes. Does that make sense? What type 2 diabetes is you don't have an insulin problem, you have a binding problem. Type 1's a whole nother world. Type 1 is you're not producing enough insulin. And type 1 is a mechanism that's more of like an autoimmune, it's more like pregnant moms and things of that nature that are starting to create that. But type 2 diabetes is the thing that can be reversed within, I've seen it as short as 7 days up to about 30 days if you go very strict on this stuff. So what we know is we have to minimize sugar and eat more things that repair the receptors, which is fat, believe it or not. Healthy fat. So to give it time, we stop eating sugar, it relaxes all of this, and when we're rebuilding cells, now we can get those cells back, those receptors back on. I want to show you this a little bit easier. Here's a normal cell. Okay, let's just say those are the receptors on a normal cell. This is what a diabetic cell looks like. Okay? This is what a cancer cell looks like. Now watch this, okay? Cancer cells, it's their number one fuel source. They have 8 times the receptors of a normal cell. So when we ingest sugar, guess what gets fed first? A cancer cell. Now here's a theory on cancer and what they're trying to look more into is that actually the formation of the cell itself is an adaptation of the body saying that there's so much sugar that this person's eating that we need to start creating cells that have more receptors that are abnormal to bind to the sugar, and it starts creating a tumor. So in other words, that the actual cells in themselves are a part of the body doing the right thing at the right time, which is another, again, thought that makes a heck of a lot of logical sense. So that's one way the body goes if there's too much sugar ingestion over time. And then the second way is I put a screaming child there is because my son's screaming all the time, or you guys see this in the grocery store, then all of a sudden it's like the parent gets tuned out to it. And the parent's just shopping still, and the kid's still talking and screaming, and everybody else hears it, but they don't. That's what happens with a cell like this. It's being screamed at so much that it's just like, I'm burnt out. I'm done. And if we don't solve this problem, we stick with diabetes forever, we keep fueling cancer cells forever, and it's an ongoing process, and we just try to, again, deal with it. So this is what's called insulin resistance is what type 2 diabetes is. It stops the hormone or leptin is what stops your body's ability to burn fat. So this is how you can become weight loss resistant in the same way. Just substitute leptin for insulin, and how body doesn't hear leptin, cell doesn't want to burn fat. Okay, now I want to take this to another level. This is a diagram that I drew up years ago that helped solve a lot of people's questions on cancer, osteoporosis, diabetes, inflammation, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, right? Some of the most common medications people take now are blood pressure pills and cholesterol pills, okay? So if we go back to the artery, okay, the artery has these walls that are somewhat muscle in there. And so you'll see a normal artery, blood goes through it one direction. So let's just use this as the heart is pumping blood one direction to, let's call it the kidneys, okay, because that's easy to draw. Okay, depending on what I eat, so we talked about sugar. So if I eat sugar, it's floating around in here, floating around in here. Sugar is highly inflammatory, right? Highly inflammatory. So it starts to irritate the walls. You know what else is highly inflammatory or irritates walls? We're going to generalize it, but toxins, additives, preservatives, coloring, dyes, right? So when we're ingesting stuff, guys have to understand it goes into our bloodstream. As it's floating through our bloodstream for our body to figure out, okay, let's bind to the toxin, get it to the digestive system and gut and get rid of it. Let's take these nutrients and plug them into different areas. It's figuring stuff out, going back to how amazing your brain is. But as this is floating and you start getting this, here's how I envision it. This whole office is an artery, blood's flowing this direction. If I walk in this room with knives and I just start scraping the heck out of these walls and cutting holes in the walls, right? If I do that, Heather's going to get on the phone and she's going to call a carpenter to do what to the holes? Patch them up. Not a bad idea, Heather, because here's who she's calling. The liver, which produces what? Cholesterol. Is cholesterol bad here? I look at cholesterol as it's a carpenter. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. There's so much inflammation that it starts doing what? Patching and patching and patching, right? As it keeps patching, if we don't take care of this, me with the knives, if there's more of me with knives, guess who she has to keep calling? And they stay hanging around and they keep patching. They're just literally doing their job, which is a great job of that. Problem is, as they do that, what happens to this artery wall? It starts to shrink. It starts to look more like this. And as it narrows, if this kidney requires 100 milliliters of blood, the heart was pumping 100 milliliters of blood to it when it was wide open. This requirement doesn't change at the kidney level, so it still needs 100 milliliters of blood. So to push that amount of blood through a smaller hole, what increases? Pressure. As pressure increases, you go to your doctor, he measures what? Blood pressure is elevated, and guess what else is elevated? Why they kind of go hand in hand here. And what does your doctor do? Gives you a drug for this to eliminate that, and for something that tries to relax this so that as it relaxes it or slows this down, now if you relax this pressure, what starts to lose? It can't push enough blood to this, wherever this is. We chose a kidney. So the kidney now doesn't get oxygen, nutrients, whatever the blood's carrying to it. So what sort of disease process could occur here? Some sort of kidney disease, right? Now what if that's a different organ? What if it's your pancreas? What if it's your little toe? What if it's your lungs? Do you see how by them just changing artificially your cholesterol and your blood pressure, that something else is being sacrificed? And why, when you guys read the side effects, they're just effects. They just don't know which one it's going to be for you. So they put them all on there knowing that that's the most common pattern that starts to shut down. See how scary this is? What should we do? Should we keep calling the carpenters and let me in here with knives, or should we just get rid of me? If you get rid of me with knives walking through this wall, what stops? This starts to go down, don't have the patching, right? And now all of a sudden, it gives it time, you give that 90 to 120 days, and it heals, and now all of a sudden, this functions again. Now, if you stay on cholesterol medications for an extended period of time, blood pressure medications for an extended period of time, your risk of osteoporosis goes up. Why do you think osteoporosis will go up? Because if you start getting rid of the carpenters, what do they have to use to patch your arteries that are inflamed? Calcium from your bone becomes the now hardening of the arteries, and you get calcified arteries. So not only you get calcified arteries, they'll tell you, well, yeah, you're getting older and you're having osteoporosis. Do you see how all this stuff works? If we just go back to simple and go, let's get rid of that stuff. Give the body time, let it do its thing. Let's not mess with the artificial. We can get people off blood pressure medications. We can stop osteoporosis. Heck, cholesterol medications themselves increase Alzheimer's because most of your nervous system is cholesterol. Your brain's 60% cholesterol. When you take a cholesterol medication, it's not just targeting and cleaning up this stuff, right? It's going throughout everything. So we have to understand the importance of why when you take in too much sugar, this process starts to happen because of so much inflammation that now all of a sudden it gets to a point where it clogs up, and it can get to a point where strokes, heart attacks, heart disease, clogged arteries, and then they just put a stent in here, right? Guys, when they respond, they're just responding to what they see. They're not looking at the mechanism that created it, and this is why you see an ongoing gotta change something because it will come back sort of process. Any questions on that? Because if I do say so myself, it's pretty brilliant. Now, the other thing I want to press on here, okay? Going back to the blueprint thing, because I never finalized the discussion of that, which is looking at the cell and these cellular receptors, okay? The old thought, and you guys were in school before me, so I know you learned this, is the nucleus controlled the cell, right? Is that pretty familiar? And I'm not trying to go back to too crazy biology stuff, but it was always taught this is the brain of the cell, and whatever it says, it does. Which now we know that is not true. And in fact, it goes back to the blueprint thing. So going back to receptors, the cell and what actually happens here comes from what's happening out here in the environment. Give you an analogy. If this office is a cell and you walk out the doors, the temperature is significantly hotter out there. What's your body going to do right when you get outside that door? It adapts. And it's going to adapt in the form of cooling down, because it's not because your DNA changed. It's not because you ate something differently. It's not because you exercised. It's not because of any other factor. It's the fact that you walked outside, it realized the environment's different, and it responded. Similarly, in your cells, your cellular environment, what is being told to this cell via hormones, receptors, fluid that's around it, all these things, it's interpreting it, then it's talking to the nucleus. And this is where DNA then, that on-off switch, epigenetics comes into play. This is how epigenetics works. These factors that we can control at some level are what make you either use a good or bad gene. Does that make sense? Meaning you have more control over your genetics than you thought. They've now found that 98% of disease has nothing to do with genes. There is 2%, very small, and you can understand that those are generally things that happen and occur at birth. Things that like a chromosome didn't form, Down syndrome, things of that nature where that's the genetic component. And now they're studying more of what these factors do to how we process vitamins and minerals, and so how it will change and turn on or off genes that don't process, say, a version of vitamin B. And they're looking at stuff like that and finding activated versions. So, any questions on that? Too much for you? Too deep? Okay, hopefully nobody's sleeping. That was my stance on sugar. So at the end of the day, minimize step one, if not eliminate for a time period, right? And the way to do it is looking at ingredient labels. Very simply, not the facts, the ingredients, which is at the bottom. Change your meats and dairies, very simple. God designed cows to eat what? Grass, yes. So what do most of the cows that we ingest at the grocery store eat? Grain. It's crazy to me that we specifically have to look for grass-fed beef. Don't you think it should be the opposite? Majority of the beef is grass-fed, and they're experimenting on a handful of cows that are grain-fed that you want to eat grain-fed with antibiotics and hormones in them, right? So guys, I bring this up because, and why this has changed too, is meat's a big deal. If you're going to spend money, just again, everything's trying to categorize around money. Buy organic, grass-fed, no antibiotic, no hormone meats, period, versus say like organic vegetables. If you're choosing, obviously, ideally, buy everything organic in the way, but it goes back to we're looking at what did God design it as? And he designed it as the one on the right. When you eat a grain-fed cow, you're instantly put in a state of inflammation. It messes with your fats and your hormones. So, as I mentioned here, the cell wall is made up of fat. So it's a cellular membrane. So the healthier this fat is, the healthier the receptors are. And that's why when somebody has diabetes, eliminate sugar, increase healthy fat. Healthy fat repairs the receptors, and the sugar doesn't stimulate the cell. So eliminating the sugar doesn't stimulate the cell, increasing fat repairs it. So changing your meats. Now, hopefully this will help you guys not look at fast food the same way ever again. On the right, I always thought, when I first looked that up, I thought it was a sneak. That is processed chicken. It's literally what they do is they pour all the parts that are kind of left over of chicken into this big grinder that turns it into a paste that then they dye, and then they form it into a nice little chicken nugget or whatever. Yeah, guys, it's crazy. When you look at actual ingredients of what makes up a chicken nugget, or look into, I'm telling you, there are weird stuff in all these low-priced, you gotta think, there's a reason it's low-priced chicken. On the left, this is another thing you could look up. It's called the Bionic Burger. It was a YouTube video. A guy literally, I believe the story is he bought 2 cheeseburgers back in I think it was 1989 or something. He ate one, put one in his coat pocket, forgot about it, puts his coat away in the closet. Year later, burger, has the receipt with it, opens it up, nothing ate it. No mold, no bacteria. It looked identical to, if he just warmed it up, it would have been exactly how he bought it from a year before. So he started a museum, and every year he would buy and just leave them out. So people now, I mean, and I've seen this at several, some of my friends' offices, they have literally a Happy Meal from 10 years ago that's just been sitting there and nothing eats it. Here's what he found. I mean, in other words, it's not getting broken down by nature. It sure as heck is not getting broken down very well inside of you. So be careful with that. And this is the type of stuff, guys, as much as we don't like price, a lot of times it determines that there's no way you get a 99-cent cheeseburger. Most of that's not beef and good stuff. It's chemicals. And so I pulled it. I pulled one thing that would pique your interest because Lunchables are very popular for kids and we're getting back into school. This is the ingredient list in Lunchables. Here's a rule of thumb. The longer it is, the worse it is. If you can't read something on there, the worse it is. It goes from most important to least important. So that's where, a lot of times you'll see some of the vitamins towards the bottom. You'll see some of the crappy stuff towards the top. You'll see things like dyes, red number 40, blue 3. Where do those, those don't grow out of the ground. So it goes into creating disease. And when the body doesn't know what to do with something, fat is a great stabilizer. So toxins love fat. That's why pigs, very toxic meat. In general, you want to steer away from pork. So, and you probably will see that pork is not on your protein choice list, okay? for a very specific reason. They don't detox well. So what they eat, you eat, and it gets stored in their fat. Tastes good, not good for you. Okay, so changing your meats, changing your dairy. So dairy's in the same boat. Grass-fed, non-homogenized. So you want raw dairy. And again, always the question is, if you were a wild animal, what would your eating look like, right? So if you're a wild animal, it's got to be close to that. Like you would actually go to a cow's udder and you would drink straight from the cow, essentially, right?
Where do you get non-homogenized, non-pasteurized dairy? You can't find it.
So I think, and I haven't been there forever, so I've just cut it out completely. I don't do any milk. And that's a whole other class on like the amount of weird pus and things that are in milk. Hate to throw it out there, but hopefully it changes some of you. So I'm more of a coconut milk, almond milk, nut milk. Yeah, you're fine with all that. But you got to think animal milks were built for who? The animal so a calf. It's to fatten up a calf. But if you do want any, I think Rosewood Market down on Rosewood Drive has it. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of dairy at all. Understanding the Dirty Dozen.
What's raw cheese?
Same thing. So it takes raw milk. So that I will incorporate in. So Whole Foods has it. I think Fresh Market has some. I think even it's becoming more popular in like Publix and Kroger and all that. Usually it's like one kind. Yeah.
Raw cheese? I've never seen that in any of those stores either.
I'm trying to think if I've seen it in Publix or Kroger.
Trader Joe's has a good selection of.
Trader Joe's has some.
Nut-based cheese.
Oh, they have some. Yeah.
Derived from nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Really good. It melts just like regular cheese.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whole Foods has that?
Whole Foods has raw cheese. Yep. And I'm sure Rosewood would have it if they have raw milk. Yeah. You can find raw organic stuff there. Dirty Dozen is this. And I just put this in, again, for a money saving tip. They rank, the EWG.org ranks every single year our produce on how much is the most sprayed versus least sprayed. So pesticides, herbicides, you can imagine, guys, our body doesn't tolerate those very well. Would you guys agree with that? Like I always give the example, like if I gave you guys a bottle of pesticides and just said start drinking some of that, nobody would do that. But if I spray it on an apple, you would just eat the apple. It's a weird way that we ingest things that aren't good for us. So on the left, they call it the Clean 15. These are the least toxic produce. In other words, if you're looking to save money, you could probably buy the ones on the left just conventionally. Just make sure they're not genetically modified. The ones on the right are the most sprayed. They're the Dirty Dozen. And therefore, you want to buy those organically. And again, I don't even know if washing them does that much, just because they've been soaking in pesticides and the plants have been adapting internally to them for a while, right? And it's updated a lot, so that's the website if you do want it. It's a cool website in general for toxicity, EWG.org. Okay, so that was a simple one. Add vitamins. So I want to touch on this because we got a couple new products that are coming out. So I'll give you my basic ones that if somebody's like, all right, I want to get healthier and I'm trying to just make sure I'm getting my nutrients. Nutrition, to oversimplify it, comes down to deficiencies and toxicities, right? So to create disease, you're either deficient in something, you're not getting enough of it, or you're taking too much of something that's bad for you. If it's something natural, the body can excrete it very easily. So we sometimes do what's called a vitamin C flush for patients, where if they're constipated, if they're constipated and they're taking stuff to just go to the bathroom, they can take 500 milligrams of vitamin C, which we have somewhere. Yep. There, yep. 500 milligrams every half hour until they get diarrhea. That's the protocol. So what you do is 500, 500, 500, 500, 500, 500, 500, whatever that adds up to, right? Let's just say it keeps going, right? Could be a lot. I've seen somebody just got to 13,000. So I mean, you're talking 1,000 every hour, and generally the body can only process about 1,000 of it for a day. But since it's water soluble, there's zero risk. I shouldn't say you can't overdose on it. It's possible. It's probably possible. but you would have to try to overdose on vitamin C. Like we do IV vitamin C at like 25,000, which is so directly into the bloodstream, so it would be pretty hard. But the most I've heard somebody come back and share their diarrhea story with me is 13,000 was what she got up to, and then she had loose stool. So here's what the body's saying, that's too much. So now she knows that it cleaned her out naturally and healthy, so she was super deficient in vitamin C. Now the following day, she starts tapering it down. So you don't take 13,000 every day, she would now knock it down to say 12,000 spread out. And then get down to 11 and start incorporating what? Foods. Foods that have vitamin C in them. So you're not taking a whole bottle of this that quickly, right? Anyways, that's a good protocol for that. So we got some new stuff coming out, but the basics. A multivitamin is my starting point for any. If somebody's like, well, hey, Dr. Tom, should I take this ashwagandha that I heard about at 2 a.m. on an infomercial? My starting point would be like, hey, are you taking a multivitamin, a men's or women's multivitamin? And if their answer is no, then don't take ashwagandha yet. Let's get your multivitamin, because this has requirements, the cell, right? So a multivitamin is cover your butt. You could eat perfectly and still be deficient. And I'll give you an interesting thing that I heard at a seminar, was if I had a tomato plant and I plucked a tomato from this side of it and a tomato from this side of it, we assume that it has the same nutritional content, right? So if you Googled like what's in a tomato, it says this much vitamin A and this much lycopene and this much vitamin B, you would think, oh, I ate a tomato, so I'm getting that. The reality is that's an average of tomatoes in general, and you're hoping you get that. This tomato on this side and this tomato on the same plant could be completely different. Not that they don't have that stuff, but it might not be the 500 milligrams of, does that make sense? You know what guarantees it? Quality supplements. When you read that, at least the ones that we carry are at a 93% active, which is generally the highest you can get, that your body's absorbing that. Meaning,
I have a question. Okay, when, you know how they have, like, if you're over a certain age, you know, these are the best, you know, it's not just men and women.
right,
But, you know, like if you're a senior.
yes.
So, yeah, so does that make
Yes,
a difference?
somewhat, but very little, to be honest. That's more of a marketing thing than anything. That in general, it's just nice to go, oh, there's a little pocket for me. When really it's like, well, you're a male, female. Now there are things though that you might start losing, like because hormones do change as we age. There are things that do occur that the support can somewhat change. And that though, in all reality, you'd want to get tested to know, because you're unique. So even if it's like, oh, okay, 50 plus should take this, it's like, well, that's so ballparky that, you know, there's a 70-year-old that might be doesn't require what the general rule of thumb for 50 plus should take this, right?
Okay.
If that answers that.
Okay, one more thing.
Yeah.
I have a girlfriend that only takes her vitamins at night because somebody told her that nighttime is the best time to take a multivitamin.
So I've done the same thing. And here was my thought. There was no research or literature behind it. So maybe I even told her this if I know her, I don't know. But because I was doing that for a while. The thing I liked about it is you don't go to the bathroom or in general, I don't go to the bathroom overnight. So in other words, it's gonna be in my system for longer. Say if I'm a water drinker and I drink tons of water, I'm going to the bathroom all the time and I'm taking water-soluble vitamins, that it might run through me faster than my body has time to use it. Now that was just Dr. Tom thinking, let's keep him in the system longer. I don't think that's necessarily the truth. And then part two of that, why I changed it, was if they're whole food supplements, it's like you're eating at night, which isn't a good idea. So now I move them to midday, knowing that my body, you know, so sometimes a little bit in the morning, but mostly midday is where I take the bulk of my supplements. And then that's it. Dinner time as well, not at night, except for there's one that I do take at night, which is part two of the detox system. The detox system I take right before bed because that binds to toxins overnight. And then we go to the bathroom, it excretes it through that, like go and pee and stuff like that. So guys, quality is huge because like 100% pure vitamin C, something like $2,500 a pill. Nobody's selling that, right? That's why you don't see Pure. And the way the vitamin, he's more like he produces them in the lab sort of guy, not like a seller of them. He said when like Walmart buys them and these different places buy them, and he equated it to like a liquor store, where like there's top shelf very pure vodka, then there's bottom shelf vodka, right? And it's based off of impurities and different things of that nature. And that's why the price is different, was his point. So it goes up. Now, are there companies that sell crap, like high price crappy stuff? Yes, unfortunately. So price isn't always an indicator, but for the most part, that's kind of, so be careful of the wheelbarrow full of vitamin C that Sam's Club sells you, because you're getting very little to no vitamin C, even though it's claiming it has that. Does that make sense? So cover your butt, men's, women's multivitamin. Here's what's cool and new that's coming out that we're gonna probably start launching. It's gonna simplify a lot of this. Daily essentials, don't have to think about it. Five of the basics that I recommend all in one packet. What do I gotta do? Take this packet, done, men's version. There's a women's version as well. What it has is what I'm sharing with you right now. So right now it's been take the individual bottles. This is gonna save a significant amount of money. So we'll be launching these within the next week. In fact, since you guys are here, you guys will be the first if you want to get them. Just let Heather know. I'm not even sure we have a price point on them yet, but I know it's significantly less than buying each individual bottle that we recommend there. Okay, but if you're buying one, let's say you're buying one, it's a multivitamin. Does that make sense? So guys, don't think ashwagandha, weird stuff until you do this. Okay? Vitamin D3 is my number 2. Unless somebody is in the sun a significant amount of time. Now, I'll tell you who even requires it more. The darker your skin, the more important it is. Why? God set you guys up to be closer around the equator and be tolerant to sun a little bit better, harder to convert to vitamin D. But you can be outside longer than, say, me with paler skin, right? So I was set up for more the northern side of things, the way my skin's set up. So you got to think of that, right? So if I go outside, I might not need to be outside as much to get my vitamin D levels up, but it's still a lot. So I'd have to be outside 2 hours during peak time to get, and I want to say in a Speedo, I believe there needs to be a significant amount of skin, good visual, a significant amount of skin showing to get that. Yeah. We'll post one on our Facebook tribe. But it's a lot, in other words. So it's very difficult, but I'm always a fan of like there's a reason vitamin D is critical, and it's sunlight is the main way we get it and convert it. And the numbers on vitamin D are unbelievable. Read like this research here blew my mind. If you get your vitamin D in the realm of 70 to 100, now, and this is interesting, okay? Here's the scale for medical doctors, or when you get your test, 30 to 100, whatever it is, nanometers, whatever. But they always will give you a number. So if you've been told you're deficient in vitamin D, I'm telling you, it's a huge deal to get it at least above that. But you know what our number is? 70 to 100 is what this literature is based on, okay? So if you're below 30, they're gonna tell you take 50,000 once a week, you know. Yes, and guys, here's the deal. It's just a terrible way of doing it, right? The body, like, you want to do it as close to how the body wants it delivered every single time. But if you see a medical doctor or the medical system freaking out about a vitamin, think about how big of a deal that vitamin is. So if they're even recommending it, big deal. But when you just get over 30, say you're at 35, now you're normal, but you're functionally super abnormal. But you know what happens when you're at 35? You don't get this, reducing your risk of most cancers by 77%. Guys, if there was a pill that was patented that they could sell that was a drug that reduced your risk of cancer by 77%, do you know how expensive that would be? And we can get it for free from the sun or in a supplement form? Unbelievable. This is what it prevents if you just get above 30, rickets. That's where the FDA, that's what they're still using. Your doctors are using, okay, you're above 30, you're good. And you could be 35 and great. You've reduced your risk of rickets, which really doesn't exist anymore. But when you get your numbers up to 70 to 100, in that range, your risk of these cancers is what gets slashed by 77%. That's unbelievable. It's a number you should, when you guys get your blood work, request it every single time. Every single time. We can do it. Again, insurance doesn't cover it. It's a finger prick. I think it's $60, something like that, that we send off to a lab and they can tell you. But again, if you do your annual blood work, request it. Heck, request it. Talk to me or one of the docs when you go in for your annual stuff to see, because I can come up with a list, and I don't know if they'll do it, but we might as well ask them to do it, because then we can interpret it. The reason they won't test it is they don't care about it. They don't have a rule for it. A lot of your thyroid tests and hormone tests, they won't do, or they'll do the bare minimum, and the minimum that they do is because there's a medication for if it's abnormal. If it's abnormal in a test that they're like, okay, these tests exist, but we don't have a medication or process for them, why would they test it?
Dr. Tom, mine was 10.
What's it, is it up now?
10 now, I'm at 48.
Okay,
So it's-
excellent, you're climbing. 10 is, I mean, again, it's extreme, and it can create a significant amount of pain. Vitamin D is involved in gut health, immune health, so nowadays it's super important. It's probably it's more potent than vitamin C when it comes to immune system. Let's put it that way. And they're finding and I think this is the only thing they found, that every cell in the body has a vitamin D receptor, which means that we don't know why, say like a brain cell or certain cells have it, but if it's there, God knew there was a reason for it to be there, which makes it why it's so important. It's again, the one we carry has probiotics in it, so it's easy to absorb and get your numbers up. And how I dose it is this. If you're in maintenance, so if you're above 70, then I'd have people take 1,000 IUs for every 25 pounds of their weight. So if you're 100 pounds, you would take 4,000 IUs or something close to that a day for maintenance. If you're deficient, so I would still consider 48 deficient, you'd take 2,000 for every 25 pounds of body weight. See how that works? And you can mega dose vitamin D too to ramp it up quick. Like certain cancer patients, we try to ramp that up quick. Heck, one of my colleagues does, for every pound of body weight for a cancer patient, they take 1,000. So if somebody weighs 225 pounds, they're taking 225,000 IU at once. You're talking more, bottle or so. And again, because it's that important to drive it up. Any questions on vitamin D? D3 specifically, that's just the one that's more usable, more absorbable. Optimal Omega, so this would be my number 3 on your list, and again, is included in the kit. Optimal Omega for this reason, that picture up there is a zoomed in version of what I showed you here. So the fat cells, the fat membrane, right, it's just 2 layers of fat. They call this the lipid bilayer that makes up your cell, bringing you back to early biology. But think of there's receptors and then channels that open and close. So that's why fat's so critical. Fat, though, has to be delivered at a certain ratio. Ideal, you guys are probably familiar with omega-6, omega-3. Okay, the ideal is generally 1-to-1, 2-to-1, or 4-to-1. In that, those are our normal accepted ranges. The average American comes in at 25-to-1 to 50-to-1. Anytime you're omega-6 dominant like that, that's what that means, you're highly inflamed. Guess what the conventional meat that you eat is? This. That's why that cow meat's. Guess what the grass-fed cow meat comes in at? This. Guess what salmon comes in at? This, right? Highly inflamed is a big deal. Why heart disease? So you remember they used to talk about red meat creating heart disease? What they didn't tell you was conventional antibiotic, hormone, grain-fed red meat does, but not grass-fed. So you see how some of these claims that the headline makes you afraid of all food, like eggs and butter, and these are healthy fats if you just get them delivered the way they were supposed to be delivered.
So is omega the same as fish oil? Is that how
So you'll want to look specifically because they can be broken down. So fish, like for example, salmon I think has 2 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. or it might be more omega-3 than omega-6. So if you were to eat the fish that way, this supplement is going to deliver it at a 2-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio. So you would take it, and again, what that would do is it just gives the building blocks of that cell membrane. Now, we also, if somebody is omega-6 dominant, that's why you hear so much about taking just omega-3 itself. So sometimes people want just omega-3, and we have a version that is just pure omega-3. The optimal omega, I like it because you still need essential omega-6s. And so the term essential means this. If you ever see essential amino acids, essential omegas, it means that your body can't produce it. It has to be made. It has to be eaten. So if you don't ingest that essential amino acid, it's not there. If you don't ingest that essential omega-6, it's not there. That's the only reason I like the combo ratio as a general rule of thumb, and then omega-3s as a if somebody is hyperinflamed. I have them take both. I have them take more omega-3s, but I also have them take that. Any questions on that? 75 trillion cells in your body, guys. Fat's a huge requirement. Does that make sense? Like literally every cell requires fat. That's why. Avoid damaged fats. So here's what you want to cook with. Fat has a smoke point, they call it. So at higher temperatures, fat goes rancid or bad or gets damaged. So coconut oil and avocado oil tolerate heat pretty well. So if you're cooking, frying, and look into the smoke points. I'm not exactly sure what they are off the top of my head, but that's what you want to cook with. Now, olive oil is good, but you don't want to fry with olive oil because it smokes very quick, and when it does, now you've taken an oil that the body would recognize and would love and turned it into something it doesn't recognize, and it's a bad fat. And the more bad fat cells, the more rancid fat cells that you have like this, if this is what that cell looked like, you can't get stuff into it, and the toxins that are being built inside can't come out. And when I hit toxicity, we're going to talk about that some more because that's a big one. Okay, so avoid trans fats, obviously. Here's a fun fact. Sometimes you'll see trans fat free, and it just means that there's still trans fat in there, which you would think it isn't, but it just means the trans fat's less than 500 milligrams per serving. Give you an example. So say it's a box of cookies, and it says they're trans fat free. The serving size might be a quarter of a cookie or a half of a cookie, so that they can get that number below. How many people eat a quarter of a cookie or a half a cookie? It's more like 7 cookies, and now you're way above the 500 milligrams sort of thing. So they'll mess with the dosage or the way they label that stuff. The last two are vitamin B complex and magnesium would be like my 4th and 5th. So these are, again, they've come up a lot in testing. So I used to do a ton of urine tests and blood testing for nutrition. And consistently, it was a complex vitamin B, which we have. A lot of women are on it anyway, just in general. Hair, skin, nails, it's a big one. It's water soluble, so it goes through us quick. It's great for energy and metabolic stuff. Magnesium, excellent for sleep, excellent for digestive system, excellent for heart, excellent for bones. So it's another big one. And migraine, like a lot of headache, migraine stuff is deficiency in magnesium. Fun fact about that, if you're a chocolate craver, like you just always feel like I need chocolate, in general, it means you're deficient in magnesium has been the link there. So if you notice like a craving for chocolate all the time, that's you want to get some magnesium in your body.
Dr. Tom.
Yes.
I take B12, but I don't take it because of my thyroid. I don't take B12 complex. What's the difference between the?
Why did they recommend not the complex?
It wasn't now. I was watching Dr. Oz show. And he was talking about taking B12 for your thyroid. So I
yes.
B12.
I mean, and no, that's how they'll get you though. Which is good. Like B12 is excellent, but you might as well get them all because there's so many benefits to all of them, and that's how they get you. It's like now you have to take a B12 by itself, a B6 by itself, a B5 by itself, a B1. So take them all, the complex, all in one. And then there's even there's a B17 that they found a few years back that's literally supposedly like the cancer killer of the B vitamins. Nobody talks about that. And you won't hear that. It gets the hush hush. In fact, I think the cancer industry is kind of keep that on the down low. You have to get that out of country from what I've found on that. But it is found in like things like apricot seeds and apple seeds. Like it's in some interesting things that you wouldn't necessarily find. Now, cool enough, so all the things that I've been teaching this class for 10 plus years, this is always what I've been recommending as kind of my thing. That's what's in your packet. So if you get into the essential stuff, you can save on all the other bottles of all that stuff. Now, the other stuff that's up here, guys, we utilize for specific things. Like we now have a thyroid supplement. It's thyroid support. So it's like, hey, if there's thyroid issues, yeah, that kind of is going to get your combination of like things like selenium and the B vitamins and things that the thyroid would need. Adrenal support. People that are highly stressed, always, in that fight or flight sort of mode, adrenal support to help calm down your adrenals, give it what it needs. And I always look at like we're just using stuff all day. So if we can replenish that or keep up with the demand, that's the point of some of these unique ones, sleep and mood, gut health ones. So there's a lot of cool stuff coming out. Okay, to finalize this and see we're at the 2-hour mark, so feel free, guys. It goes quick. Core plan and advanced plan. So as I mentioned, just to reiterate, just think of what plan you guys want to start to implement. And I think I put this back in here just so I could say this. On this, you'll notice that there's italicized ones that you might have circled, and then there's ones that aren't italicized. On that one page, like the whole box at the bottom isn't italicized. Italicized is the slanted font, and then there's regular font. If you go to the next page, the back of that one too, like the top, you'll see more of like the berries are italicized, but the other ones aren't, the other fruits. So why I did that was, if it's italicized, that's advanced plan. That way if you're like, all right, I want to do the advanced plan, so what do I eat? Italicized, you can, if it's not, all of them are core plan. So literally all of them are core, only the italicized are advanced, if that makes sense. So like if you're doing an advanced plan, you can't eat cherries. You can't eat bananas, you can't eat pineapple, you can't eat any of that stuff. That's advanced plan. If you're doing core plan, you can eat that.
What is the box at the bottom?
That was just a way to show, kind of just delineate that those switched from italicized to that, because people were missing that it kind of was snuck in there. Yeah, it just means that those aren't italicized. So those would be core plan only, not advanced plan under the high fiber carbs. The other part to this sheet, just while we're on it, is replacement ideas. So I put on the left, if like your craving or addiction is that thing on the left, to the right is something that's healthier. Now here's the disclaimer. It doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy per se, it's healthier than what's on the left. Some of it is healthy, but I'll give you an example, like sodas. To the right is juicing, which is healthy. Next to that is Zevia, which is a soda that's not healthy, but it's healthier than Pepsi. Does that make sense? So I don't want you guys slugging down Zevias like, oh, I'm getting some health benefits from it. No, it's a transition point from, Pepsi. So it's soda sweetened with stevia, is what that is. And so here's some criteria on if you should be advanced plan or not. Here's your indications: high cholesterol, high blood pressure, triglycerides, blood sugar issues, insulin issues, quite a bit, right? If you have something though, that's where cycle through advanced plan, only eat those foods for a 30-day minimum, but 90 to 120 ideally. Okay, here's the sweeteners: good, bad, the ugly. The good, stevia, xylitol and erythritol are kind of what we approve as if you're looking to sweeten something. And then the okay, agave nectar, honey, maple syrup, meaning they're still pretty high in sugar, but they're natural, so that's good. And then the ugly, anything artificial. If you guys are using in your coffee artificial anything, Splenda, Equal, run from that. The stuff that's coming out on that is all some significant neurological issues on long-term use of those. So again, they recommend it for diabetics. It is a terrible idea because you're sacrificing something more significant, which is brain health. Food sensitivity test, I threw this in there just so you guys realize, here's something unique that we can look at diet plans and look at what you guys are eating, and sometimes it doesn't solve your mystery for the reason of you might be sensitive to the food. For example, if somebody writes down that like, okay, they eat, I can't even read it, grapefruit, okay? And they're like, yeah, I'm eating grapefruit. I would look at it and go, grapefruit's great. It's good for the body. But for this person, you'll see that things need to be in the green. This person's in the orange, meaning they're sensitive to it. So another person eats grapefruit and they're in the green. They can eat grapefruit. So what does sensitive mean? The best thing to give you a visual is like if you're allergic to a bee and you get stung, you're going to the hospital. It's a big deal. If you're sensitive to bees, which we all are, then it's like you get stung and it turns red. So we have a reaction, but it's not full blown. So if this person eats grapefruit and they're sensitive to it, their gut's having a reaction. They just might not, it's not a huge deal. But that can create weight gain. It can create hormone issues. It can create immune issues. So it's another one of those tests. If you can get your doctor to do it, awesome. Normally it's 600. We've been able to work with a lab to get it down to 300 so we could test it, like, again, finger prick, send it off. And this is what the sheet would look like. It tests, I think, 58 different foods so you can find out what you're sensitive. This person, look at the dairy area. It's all black. I mean, so they're extremely sensitive. Now, this is unusual. I don't generally see tests that come back that they literally have a ton of issues. This person must have been highly immunocompromised. That's when like the autoimmune stuff and things like that comes into play. The most recent one I did was 3 or 4 weeks ago. Person had 0 sensitivities, only a little bit of candida sensitivity. So that was the only thing in hers. And she's been a patient for 8 years, does a ton of this. So really cool to see that her stuff looked good. Last things to tighten up this, prepare and plan. Guys, it's as simple as what you just circled, this last sheet, plug it in. If you don't have a plan, McDonald's has a plan for you, okay? That's always the issue, is we tend to wait and then we're hungry and it's like, well, this is easy. So know that if you can write it out, and you don't have to be perfect, okay? That's where the vacation rule comes into play. Write in there vacations. Like if you're like, hey, I like to eat pizza, all right, don't do pizza every day. Just go, I'm gonna do really well, and then Friday night, pizza night, right? That way it's something that you can look forward to and you're not guilty. What happens is, and this is a great, cool thing mindset-wise that we gotta realize, is more so our guilt behind what we're doing is worse than the food that we're actually eating. Does that make sense? Like if I know that a Snickers bar is bad for me, and here I am putting it to my face, do you see what's happening subconsciously or consciously in my brain? I'm like, why am I eating something that's so terrible for me? And here I keep going. These chips are so bad for me, right? And so, but the wild part is the chip itself, or the Snicker bar itself, I mean, it's bad, but it's not, you just made it significantly worse by your thought. So what I like, if I'm gonna cheat or have a vacation, I look at it as that. I look at it as I'm going to eat pizza and I've planned for it. Now I can feel good about eating pizza. I'm still gonna have the consequences of feeling crappy the next day, but still. Water rule, half your weight in ounces. I think most people are familiar with drink half of your weight every day in ounces of water. So which can be a lot, right? But that helps prevent you from being dehydrated, and it minimizes your hunger pathway. Keeping honest food logs, always cool. When I was really strict in this stuff, I would take a picture of my meals. So I just wasn't very good at like tracking what I ate. So I took pictures for a while, then turned it into a food log. Like I'd look at like, oh, I liked that one. It was good for me. Let's put that in for lunches on Tuesdays. I could flip back through it too. And guys, it's a really interesting thing when you know you have to take a picture of what you're eating on how much it changes. Like, do I really want to eat this? And like have that in my log, right? So that was it. And actually I skipped over the addition rule. The addition rule is, if you know your current meal plan or what you currently eat is pretty bad, then add before you subtract. Meaning you can add supplements before you start changing your meals. Or you can add in a healthy food before you start taking away foods. It's a really good tool for kids. Like if you're trying to get your kid to eat broccoli, instead of eliminating his French fries, keep him eating the French fries, but just say, hey, just eat a little bit of broccoli first, and then you can have your fries. So you've added, then you're going to start subtracting afterwards. All right, so write one thing down or think of one thing. Could be simple, 1 vacation meal a week, eliminate soda, juice cleanse, half your weight. I mean, there's a lot in the nutrition world. We hit on the basic supplements. We hit on food combination. So you guys kind of understand the food combination thing. Just kind of remember those categories: meats, nuts and seeds, fruits, and then starches. And then your vegetables are kind of on their own island. You can combine them with anything. Fasting real quick. If you think of just like a 24-hour day, so 1 and 24, you want to keep your window of eating to somewhere between 8 to 12 hours, ideally. Meaning, think of your clocking in and clocking out from your first meal to your last meal. That's how much time you have. The rest is called fasting. You're not putting anything in your body that stimulates your digestive system. So for example, if my first meal is at 9 a.m., I have technically, if I'm going on the long end, till 9 p.m. to finish my eating window. On the shorter end, which is more ideal, the closer you get to that, you're looking at 5 p.m. if you started at 9. Now you get to control that, but what you're doing here is you're training your gut to clock in and clock out. So when it can clock in, it knows, hey, I'm going to be eating for a while here. It doesn't mean you're eating the whole time. It means like meal 1, and you might have a meal in here, and maybe a snack. You might have, so again, wherever you're hungry, but you're done by that time. Then this is where the benefit occurs. That's where you're fasting. And that means just water. You can even throw coffee in there, tea, as long as it doesn't stimulate digestive system. So black coffee, not with milk or weird stuff in it. I love it because hormone repair, weight loss. Think of the work that has to be done when you eat something, in all reality. Like I do think of it as a manufacturing plant. So every time you ingest something, good or bad, the body has to break it down. So when you do that and you put it in there, it's on the clock. So you eat something that's why eating late's a bad idea, because what you're doing is when you're supposed to be resting, repairing overnight and sleep, your body's digesting and working. See how that works? And then you wake up tired, sluggish. So you want to minimize that late night sort of deal.